NBA super teams don't always win championships, and having 3 All-Stars doesn't guarantee success. The Lakers with LeBron, AD, and Russ was an abomination. The Nets trio of KD, Kyrie, and Harden flamed out spectacularly. And another big 3 that proved to be a big mistake plays for the Chicago Bulls. LaVine, DeRozan, and Vucevic were supposed to make the Bulls title contenders, but that couldn't be further from the truth.
This team right here, I don't know what to say. That is just disgusting.
Here's how the Bulls sacrificed their future for mediocre results and why they could become one of the worst teams in the NBA. After Jimmy Butler's trade from the Bulls in 2017, Chicago had the worst 3-year stretch of the entire NBA. Bulls fans were desperate, and they demanded the removal of Garpax, which was a nickname for Gar Forman and John Paxson, the most hated GMs in the entire NBA. Forman and Paxson had a long history of bad trades, draft mistakes, and getting into arguments with almost everyone. Jimmy Butler's personal trainer, Travell Gaines, said that he met drug dealers with more integrity than Gar Forman, and that the Bulls are the most toxic organization in the NBA. Finally, in 2020, the Bulls replaced Forman with Arturas Karnisovas. The Lithuanian GM came to the franchise with the pedigree of drafting Nikola Jokic for the Nuggets and a ton of connections in Europe. So Chicago had faith that he would guide the franchise into stability and long-term playoff contention. Karnisovas inherited a team with Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, and Wendell Carter, who were all in their early 20s, and he had a solid base and enough draft picks to build the team back to contention.
I think we got some consistency after All-Star break. I mean, even before All-Star break, we got Otto in the trade. Once you start getting consistency in the lineup, I know both of us got pretty hot, so we got our stride.
Nobody expected the Bulls to win immediately, and it was clear that it would take them some time to build up their roster and become a contender. But Karnisovas had other plans, and within a year, he put all of his chips in the middle of the table and went all in. In March of 2021, less than a year after he took over the Bulls job, Chicago's GM made his first big move. He traded Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter, and 2 first-round picks for Nikola Vucevic. Now, Vucevic was a 2-time All-Star in his prime, a brilliant offensive center who was averaging 24 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 assists for the Magic. Vuce was supposed to push the Bulls into a playoff position, but after LaVine got injured towards the end of the season, Chicago ended up in 11th place, missing the play-in tournament. And because of the Vucevic trade, Chicago didn't have their first-round pick anymore, which Orlando used to select Franz Wagner, who was turning out to be one of the most promising young big men in the NBA. After the draft came free agency, where Karnisovas doubled down and decided to swing for the fences once again. He signed Alex Caruso and traded some veteran role players and draft picks to get Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan. In a vacuum, those looked like great moves, especially because neither of those players were signed to max contracts. But Karnisovas wasn't done dealing. Just before the start of the season, he traded away Lauri Markkanen for a second-round draft pick and a protected first-round pick. However, this was soon proven to be a huge mistake, as Lauri blossomed and became an all-star. Nevertheless, the Bulls were happy with Karnisovas, as he was able to bring in 2 all-stars and valuable role players after just 1 season. Some people even called the Bulls contenders, with a potential appearance in the NBA Finals. But in reality, the Bulls spent all of their resources on second-grade all-stars, because neither of their players were ever considered a top 10 NBA player.
It's frustrating knowing how much everybody cares and how much the group, put into it. We have the talent to do it. We've shown that.
While the addition of DeRozan and Vucevic raised the team's floor and made them a virtual lock to make the playoffs, the Bulls' ceiling didn't look that high. But when the 21-22 season began, Chicago had a furious start with 4 straight victories. Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso proved to be the best defensive backcourt duo in the NBA, and it wasn't even close. They hounded opposing ball handlers like 2 mad pit bulls, and it was hard for the opponents to even start their offense and get into their sets. Zach LaVine terrorized defenses with his outside shot and powerful drives to the basket. And if opponents played hard defense and everything else failed, the Bulls could always rely on DeMar DeRozan and his mid-range mastery. DeMar played the best basketball of his career, averaging 28 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. And when he got the ball in the mid-range, he looked like the second coming of Michael Jordan, hitting over 50% of his shots. LaVine and DeRozan were 2 of the best one-on-one players in the game. And if you shut one down, the other would bury you. Halfway through the season, the Bulls were sitting at the top of the Eastern Conference, which was unimaginable just a year prior. But then the injury bug started nibbling at the Bulls' title dreams. At the start of the season, they lost second-year forward Patrick Williams, who was out for 4 months. After 35 games, Lonzo Ball was ruled out for the entire year with a knee injury, and Caruso was in and out of the lineup for the whole season. Those 3 guys were Chicago's best defenders, and without them, their defense sank from the top 5 in the NBA to the bottom 10. After the All-Star break, the Bulls lost 17 out of the 25 games to finish the regular season and dropped from first place to 6th.
We gotta be a lot more consistent. We've given up a lot of third quarter and fourth quarter leads. We've been able to play with anybody, but we just given up the rope a little bit. So
in the playoffs, the Bulls ran into Giannis and the Bucks, who were the worst possible opponent. In Game 2, DeRozan's brilliance was enough for the Bulls to win a game, but they couldn't do anything more than that, and Chicago lost the series in 5. In the offseason, Karnisovas extended Zach LaVine and gave him a max contract, which was a risky move considering his injury history. Other than that, he didn't have wiggle room to do much else, because all the resources were spent in the previous offseason.
we understand the type of team that we have, the talent that we have, but it hasn't been enough the last couple of years to get us over that hump.
So the Bulls entered the 2023 season with pretty much the same roster that lost in the first round of the 2022 playoffs. So while everybody around them got better, the Bulls stayed the same because they put themselves in the corner without an exit strategy. They didn't have cap space to sign new players, and they didn't have draft picks to get some fresh blood. 2 of their 3 highest paid players were 32 and 33 years old, and it was clear that their championship window was closing. And when the season started, Chicago fans had to swallow a new dose of bitter pills. While the Bulls had a top 10 defense thanks to the return of Williams and Caruso, the Bulls' offense just wasn't clicking. They ranked dead last in three-pointers made for much of the year, and near the league bottom in free throw rate and offensive rebounding. Other than Zach LaVine, they had no other shooter on the roster. And while DeRozan's mid-range looks cool, it's still only worth 2 points, and a heavy dosage of long twos is outdated and ineffective. To make matters worse, Lonzo Ball suffered several setbacks on his knee, and he was once again ruled out for the entire season. The Bulls were lottery-bound, but then they traded for Patrick Beverley, who injected a dose of energy and fighting spirit that they desperately needed. With Beverley in the lineup, the Bulls regained part of their identity. Since Pat Bev's arrival, Chicago led the league in shooting percentage, was 6th in steals, and 5th in net rating. But the biggest difference was that their defense exploded, and the Bulls finished the regular season with a top 5 defensive ranking. And with Beverley, they again became the same team they were when Lonzo Ball was healthy. Caruso finally had real support on the perimeter, which shut down the opposing dribble penetration and gave slow-footed Vucevic enough time to recover and get in good defensive position in the paint. DeRozan was also freed from a large defensive burden, allowing him to play like a free safety, which increased his defensive efficiency and preserved his energy for offense. Pat Williams was relieved of guarding the opposing guards, but no one profited more than Zach LaVine. In the first part of the season, Zach's deficiencies, such as poor help defense, average half-court offense, and questionable shot selection, were constantly exposed. But since Beverley had been on the team, LaVine has blossomed. Just like DeRozan, he also experienced a huge relief on the defensive end and allowed him to play a lot more in transition. And Zach LaVine is a beast in transition. His quickness and agility allow him to cover a lot of space in a short time and attack backpedaling defenders on the wrong foot. Since the trade deadline, LaVine was the league's 8th leading scorer with 29 points per game on 55, 45, 89 shooting splits. The Bulls ended the season on a high and made the play-in tournament as the 10th seed.
We're not escaping competition, okay? And we need to compete a whole lot better.
Still, nobody gave them much hope to make the playoffs. And in their first play-in game, the Raptors were considered favorites. But then, thanks to Caruso's and Beverley's pesky defense, Zach LaVine's monster shooting, and loud screams from DeMar DeRozan's daughter, the Bulls surprised the world and got past the Raptors. However, in the second play-in game to secure the final spot in the playoffs, the Bulls ran out of talent. They got buried in the fourth quarter against the Miami Heat, and their season was over.
Gave ourselves an opportunity. We competed. We didn't give up. No matter how many ups and downs, how many tough moments we had, we continue to try to figure out how to be resilient.
For a team that had hopes of title contention, they managed to win just one playoff game in 2 years and are arguably the most disappointing team in the NBA right now. They wanted to win immediately, but for that to happen, things had to go nearly perfectly for them, and it didn't.
I think we have what it takes, just we have to find that within ourselves.
They just gotta look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves what they could be better and how much can they improve.
Sure, you can't win in the NBA without being healthy, and Lonzo Ball's injury certainly had a lot to do with their failure. But even with all their other players healthy and acquiring Beverley as Lonzo's replacement, they still weren't good enough to make the playoffs.
This season hasn't worked out at all the way the Bulls expected.
No one's gonna feel sorry for us.
If Ball was healthy, the Bulls still weren't that good, and the best they could do was win a first-round playoff series. Due to the impatience of the owner Jerry Reinsdorf and Karnisovas, they are not good enough to make the postseason, and they're not bad enough to get a high draft pick. If they don't trade some players, Chicago will have 0 first-round picks in the next 3 drafts. And that makes them a team with the worst upside in the NBA. They will likely lose Vucevic in free agency. Lonzo Ball will probably miss the entire 2024 season due to the complications with his knee. And DeRozan is 34 years old, entering the final year of his contract. Their best course of action would probably be to blow it all up and acquire some draft picks by trading LaVine and DeRozan. But whatever they decide to do, they are not going to win many games and are almost certainly going to become the worst team in the NBA.